Moving on now, but staying with diplomacy, China is strengthening its ties with Latin America, offering nearly $10 billion in yuan-denominated credit and introducing visa-free travel for several countries in the region. President Xi Jinping made the announcement at the China-CELAC Forum in Beijing, a platform Beijing uses to bolster economic and strategic cooperation with Latin America. The credit line is seen as part of China's push to internationalize the yuan, shifting trade away from the dollar while encouraging infrastructure and development projects. Xi also said trade with CELAC members hit a record $515 billion in 2024, fueled by China's demand for food, energy and raw materials. Among those attending the forum were Brazilian President Lula da Silva, Chilean President Gabriel Boric and Colombian President Gustavo Petro. Besides trade, Xi called for deeper cooperation in areas including clean energy, 5G, cybersecurity, AI and counter-terrorism. The summit comes as Latin America has become a key strategic arena in the geopolitical tussle between Beijing and Washington. Well, following these conversations, we are joined by a guest to discuss the talks that have taken place, but also the ramifications. We're joined by Srikanth Kondapalli, a professor of China Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thank you very much for being here, Srikanth. The first thing I want to look at is this relationship between China and Latin American countries. It's of course something that's been brought up by the Trump administration, but how significant is this alliance with China?
Well, the China-CELAC meeting is important for China because there are 600 million consumers in Latin America and Caribbean. They have a total GDP of nearly $6 trillion. In the light of the Trump tariff wars, China wants to diversify its trade figures with other countries, including with the Latin American and Caribbean countries. So this $500 billion actually represents the second largest trading partnership for China. It used to be just about $12 billion 24 years ago, and now it has increased to $500 billion, quite substantial increase in the trade. Secondly, the Chinese look at the Caribbean region and Latin America because this is a backyard of the United States. Since the United States has come to the backyard of China in terms of East China Sea, South China Sea and others, China today wants to go into the American backyard and exert pressure on the United States. So United States has the Monroe Doctrine, which the Chinese want to violate and become a stakeholder in the Latin American countries. And for this, they have to become the largest trading partner, which they are on their way to become one. Second is investments and others. These are packaged in the Belt and Road Initiative projects, which is pretty active in the Latin American countries. So this is another consideration for China to balance the United States. They mention this as part of multipolarity, which basically means moving away from the United States influence. The third area where China wants to exert its pressure on Latin America is also in terms of the aid given to these so that they can depend on China. So as a part of the aid program, China released a white paper on Latin America some years ago, and they have been announcing a slew of measures for increasing aid to the Latin American countries and of course Caribbean. So this has increased substantially, and much of these are in healthcare, education, infrastructure projects, and others.
Yes.
Fourth main area of attention is in the space program. China has signals intelligence facilities in Cuba. It also has a CBERS China-Brazil Earth observation satellite program with Brazilians, because Brazil has a high-tech sector, Embraer aircraft they used to produce. So China is tapping into the Brazilian space as well as aerospace programs. So this is another consideration for China.
Yes, absolutely, Srikant. Of course, amid global tariff pressure from the United States and trade tensions, we have seen Xi visit countries within East Asia. Of course, he went to Vietnam, Malaysia, Cambodia, looking to strengthen trade ties. Do you think the significance of the US tariffs means that this meeting has a bit more significance behind it?
Yes, indeed. However, yesterday there was a meeting in Geneva between He Feng, the Vice Premier, and the US Treasury Secretary, and they cobbled up some kind of an arrangement on trade and tariff issues. We do not have all the details, but this will be a 90-day kind of reprieve from the 245% tariffs imposed by President Trump on China, and China retaliated with 145% on the United States products. So now both of them agreed to reduce these to about 10% on each other, but after 90 days, try to resolve the trade and tariff. So this has come in the background of this CELAC meeting. Of course, CELAC meeting has been organized quite a long time ago. However, the US-China trade deal that was concluded yesterday was a different one, but it indicated that China and the US are trying to come to an arrangement on the trade and tariffs. If that were to be so, the CELAC will lose some significance in terms of the US-China relations.
Yes.
Having said that, the Trump administration has actively participated in the Panama Canal related controversy, where a Chinese company was doing the dredging projects for a few $100 million. So this is one of the main grouses of China in terms of the Panama Canal. So it looks like the Trump administration is reiterating the Monroe Doctrine, which means that we will probably see some differences or even conflict between China and the US in the Panama Canal, South American, and other regions in the vicinity.
Yes, Srikant, we are coming to the end of our discussion, but there are a couple of points I want to touch on before we let you go. Of course, visa-free travel is one, but I want to look at this credit line. Of course, doing research on this and with your knowledge, we have an understanding of what this means. But for our audience, can you explain what this is? Over $9 billion credit line to these Latin American countries, which is equivalent to around 66 billion yuan. What is a credit line, and how will that help these Latin American countries?
Well, this is still a black box, but let me explain in simple words. Chinese state-owned enterprises and banks like the Exim Bank, Export-Import Bank, CDB, China Development Bank, or PBOC, People's Bank of China, or other state-owned state-owned banks, they provide credit for specific countries and specific industries. And these credits, we do not know on how much would be the loan, because prior to the dispersing of credit, they have to sign a sovereign agreement, an MOU, where they are not supposed to disclose the details of the credit line. So only one African country, Ghana, had come out of this secrecy clause and showed to the international community that the loans are coming at a very high interest rate, sometimes at 5%. For example, the Hanoi Metro in Vietnam was at 5%. Also, the projects in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, or other countries are at very high interest rate. But these countries will not be able to tell us in public because they signed an agreement with China. So this is the root cause of debt diplomacy. And China exerts a lot of pressure on these countries not to disclose the provisions of these credit lines. So it is still a black box. We do not know exactly what is the percentage of interest that is asked from these recipient countries. Universally, it is 0.02%. If you take a loan from IMF, World Bank, or Dubai Holdings, Singapore Holdings, or the ODA of Japan. However, the Chinese interest rate go up to nearly 0.5%. This is the bane of many of the Belt and Road Initiative projects, and this has led to a lot of debt for these countries. There is a study in Maryland University which suggested that 16 to 17 countries in the world today who are part of the Belt and Road Initiative are in debt.
Srikant, thank you ever so much for detailing